some of the comments about what life is like today as it was projected 100 years ago. The people are looking to the mayor to redeem his campaign pledge to enforce the ordinance prohibiting aerial craft lighting in the streets. Streets were made for pedestrians. Another prediction of what it would be today, the application of the late invention by C.S. Kress by which aircraft are automatically prevented from colliding with each other should be made compulsory for the safety of the general public. The wisdom of many of our forefathers who insisted on a universal language and were called fools and cranks for their persistency is now apparent to all. Imagine, if you can, the difficulties that would confront us now if we had to contend with 100 different languages as the people had to do 100 years ago. Some steps should be taken by the government to prevent the horse from becoming extinct. For centuries, the horse was a useful beast of burden and pleasure and an honor to his ancestors, if for no other reason a small herd should be maintained. Many of our children never saw a horse, and they never will see one unless something is done to preserve the species. Amazing. A local mention, again, as they projected what life would be like here today. Yates patent compressed food pellets at all grocery stores. Yesterday was a fine day for the heat and light storing companies. 230 miles an hour was made today by a racing airship. Uncle John Quinlan died at his home on 25th Street this morning, aged 182 years, 3 seasons and 39 days. A model dressed in the fashion of the 19th century is attracting considerable attention in a show window on Cherry Street. The North Pole District cast 14 votes for Kansas City in the Capitol contest. That's great. Lou Perkins and Charlie Cooper left last night for a circle around the Earth in Lou's aerolite. They will land only twice en route and will be back in 6 days. During the rain and windstorm yesterday afternoon, the city was almost deserted, and the higher altitudes were thick with aircraft containing people who had gone up to avoid the storm.
Here's a little excerpt from December 31st of 1900. When the Century Ends is the title of the Century Ball, the climax of the celebration here. All preparations for the event in readiness. So this was right before the Century Ball took place. When the 20th century gets to Kansas City, the people will be waiting for it. The preparations for the celebration of the death of the old year and the birth of the new are unusually elaborate this year because a new century is involved, which will give a greater significance and intensity to all celebrations. The bells and the whistles and the reports of guns and pistols at midnight, I believe that's illegal now, isn't it, will herald an event which will never come again in the lives of those who are now living. There will be watch parties in hundreds of houses. There will be congregations assembled in the Protestant and Catholic churches. There will be parties in the clubs. And there will be one event greater than all, the Century Ball in Convention Hall. When the clock strikes 12 tonight, 150 men and women dressed in the picturesque costumes of the colonial days will be bowing and stepping through the minuet. They will be dancing under soft lights in time to graceful music and under a canopy of green, for the hall has been elaborately decorated with evergreen, holly, and mistletoe. 10 carloads of evergreens were used in the decorations. The advanced sale of seats shows that the balconies will be filled with spectators when the midnight hour arrives. It will be one of the most beautiful pictures that Convention Hall has ever seen.
This is okay.
This is a little letter from a schoolgirl of 1901 to the schoolgirls of 2001. I want to wish you a happy new year. When you open the box and find this, I hope you will be as happy in 2000 and 2001 as we have been in 1900 and 1901. I hope your Century Ball is a success. Ours was. Remember, your enjoyment will be watched by me. From what place, I cannot say. I am 15 years old, and I do not hope to be living 100 years from now. Hoping you will not be unhappy in the new year, I am yours with love, Aletha M. Barr, B-A-R-R, 3516 Harrison Street, 1901.
This is the forerunner of the Nelson Gallery of Art. It's the Western Gallery of Art. At this time, it would have been located at the old library, which is still at 9th and Locust Street. And this is an illustrated catalog with some account of the pictures and of the painters. And how, but you can see the type of illustration that's in it.
This article was written January 2nd, and as you recall, David mentioned that this box was left open for a couple of weeks after the Century Ball so that people could observe it and drop a few additional items into it. And this one is titled Lives Only in Memory Now, Wonderful in Detail, Remarkable in Ensemble. Over on the west side of Convention Hall Monday night, near one of the passageways to the lounging room beneath the balcony, stood a small copper box. It was plain and unpolished, but it was in reality the most important and significant, certainly the most permanent feature of the grandest function the West ever knew, the Century Ball. For in it will be transmitted to posterity the records and archives of that grand event. This copper box is designed to contain the names of all who participated in the ball, either on the floor or in the boxes. It is large enough to hold the card of every person, and all were invited to deposit them there, with such sentiments written thereon as suited their several fancies. All evening the box stood receptive, and all evening there poured into it a steady stream of matter, which the great-great-grandchildren of those who are alive today, January 2nd, 1900, will read and ponder over. 1901. Visiting cards by the hundreds went into this box, together with verses, sentiments, and remarks, some of sage advice, some of humor, some of solemnity. Letters to the generations yet unborn helped to fill the receptacle, and books and pamphlets of various sorts were added to the rest. The box is still open and will be for some days. It was considered desirable to put into it pictures of the ball and accounts of it as published by the daily papers. There will also be placed in it rosters of the Kansas City commercial bodies such as the Board of Trade, the Commercial Club, the Livestock and Produce Exchanges, and the like. A city directory, the Society Blue Book, and the City Blue Book. A short history of the hall to be written by Secretary Glendenning. Of the directors and a host of photographs will also find room therein, so that the chances are that when posterity opens the copper receptacle, it will be better informed of events and things of this day and age than we are of what occurred 100 years ago. This copper box idea was suggested by Judge C.E. Moss, and he has worked hard to make it a success. He has done well, and when it is placed in the pillar of the hall prepared for it and the plate marking it is put in place, he will have the satisfaction of knowing that the most permanent thing about the Great Ball was originated by him, and that his work was well and faithfully done.
This is to the descendants of James Lonergan. Any Lonergans here? The descendants of Charles Moss. I've gone looking for the descendants of Charles Moss, and I haven't found any. So, unfortunately, we have none to give to you. To the loyal Christian scientists of the next new century. To the beloved brothers and sisters of the new century, it seems eminently fitting that alongside the greetings sent by the exponents of many questions and beliefs, a message from the cause attracting phenomenal attention this close of the 19th century, namely our beloved Christian Science, be not wanting among these thoughtful remembrances and salutations. This one's addressed to the committee opening the box. Let me see what it says. This is a souvenir calling card. There are quite a number of calling cards that are still in here that comes from Henry Williams. He's with the Jackards, which is the jewelry company, at 1032 Main Street, Kansas City, Missouri. Okay. This one is to be opened by the Mr. Honorable Mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, and the U.S. President in 2001 century. I suppose. Some of the handwriting is challenging, so you have to excuse us if we're taking some time to determine whether it is something we can read aloud. Swift & Company has a whole packet of material here. This is a note to people named Cravens and Sari. Greetings from the year 1901, and flowers that once have blown forever dies. Goes back in here.
Here's another short one from January 3rd of 1901. There's some interesting references to those of us who are in this room right now. Messages to posterity, letters in the Century Box in Convention Hall. A treat is in store for the antiquity and students of history who will pursue their investigation around Kansas City 100 years hence, if they dig into the masonry of the first pier west of the main entrance to Convention Hall. And if you recall, the box was originally placed in that Convention Hall, as David said, and then moved over to Municipal Auditorium. The committee in charge of the Century Ball on New Year's Eve will, in a few days, deposit the Century Box, one of the features connected with the ball, in the place where it is intended that it shall rest unmolested for 100 years. A number of persons have availed themselves of the opportunity through the medium of the Century Box to communicate with the shadowy beings of the 21st century. That's you and I. It was intended for this purpose in addition to serving as a depository for records that may be of great value in connection with the history of Kansas City that the historian of the future is to write. It needs only a slight stretch of the imagination to picture the expressions of wonder on the faces when they rummage through the mass of papers that the box will contain.
this is a letter to the children of Kansas City in 2001. I enclosed some pictures to show the people of 2001 how we dress in these days. I hope you will enjoy them and think them pretty. I know I like to look back and see people dressed hundreds of years ago. I am a Kansas City Central High School pupil, and I am 15 years old. The children of these days go to school, play games, go to parties to dance the waltz and two-step, and do all sorts of things to have fun. Yours sincerely, Eileen Flavin, F-L-A-V-E-N.
Okay, this is to the president of the Newsboys Union from Charles W. Purvis, 43 years old. I don't know if we have any Newsboy Union members here. It includes a badge.
This unedited. I'm not sure what it said. I was going to say. Greetings. Years have passed, and our dust lies in the silent tomb. You are called upon to read this sketch and these prophecies. The writer hereof was born in Clay County, Missouri, south of Kearney, 1.5 miles, June 19th, 1856. And at this writing, January 1st, 1901, is a citizen of Excelsior Springs, Missouri. First, the curative properties of the Excelsior Springs waters were discovered in the year 1880 and soon after the town was platted. Second, the population in 1900 was nearly 2,000. Third, the waters are known for their great medical properties in nearly every state of the Union. Fourth, we now have 2 lines of railway into Kansas City, the Wabash and the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul. Prophecies. First, in the year AD 2001, a population of 25,000. What is the population of Excelsior Springs, would you guess? Second, in the year of AD 2001, the most noted health resort in the United States. Third, rapid transit lines will bring us within 40 minutes ride of Kansas City. Flying machines will not be in use on this line. Fourth, palatial homes and beautiful estates will crowd the way from Kansas City to this famous resort. Fifth, we will welcome the citizens of Kansas City to our beautiful suburban city. Sixth, we enclose a small book entitled The Famous Waters of Excelsior Springs, Missouri. Lastly, the 20th century spreads out before us, brilliant in promise, prophetic of commercial, social, and moral supremacy, and of the finer and higher rewards of a great nation, if it forsake not the way of truth, justice, and righteousness. Signed, H.H. King, January 1st, A.D., 1901.
very difficult to read it. This is Alexander Henderson, who was in charge of the firemen on duty at the Century Ball on the 31st of December, 1900. He's the second assistant chief of the fire department. The chief of the fire department was a man named George Hale, who was an inventor and invented a number of things, including what was called the Hale Tower. It was a method of raising the water stream above the building so that it could be directed down onto the building itself. We still use Hale Towers in varying forms today. He was also known as an inventor of a harnessing system that literally allowed him to get his horses harnessed and out of the fire station in 8 seconds. And when one of the earlier letters mentioned that our fire department was a winner of these grand international contests, it was because of George Hale's activities. Yes. And the harness system is up here, and there's the tower, engraving of the tower. I don't know, is this still working? I guess not. Anyway, we'll get this down so that you can see it as well. They did it right. At the convention, at the ball, those people who were admitted to the floor, who had paid for a floor ticket, got this wonderful little medal that they could keep as a souvenir, but also identify them as appropriate as possible to be on the ball floor. I said earlier that the ball was by invitation only, and that most people in Kansas City did not have an opportunity to attend. 2 days later, before they took down all of the decorations, they opened the hall again. You could pay 25 cents to go in and have a dance and participate in the dance, to actually enjoy all the decorations that they were extremely proud of, and it was open to anyone. And as you can imagine, there were letters to the editors complaining that the riffraff was going to come up and hold this gigantic orgy, and it was going to ruin the city and ruin our wonderful reputation. It was very well received, even to the point of suggestions that a ball be held each month for the citizens of the city. As far as I know, they didn't do that, but at least they did have one night in the hall.
This letter is from W.B. Tremblay, city clerk of Kansas City, Kansas, writing to the Honorable Mayor of Kansas City, USA today, remembering again that was to be a combination of Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas. My dear sir, 52,000 Kansas City Kansans send you greetings and wish you a Happy New Year. The past century has brought the world many blessings, nearly all of which were unknown January 1st, 1801. What are now common everyday affairs were then either unknown or were such luxuries as only the rich could enjoy. The person who would have prophesied that by January 1st, 1901, steam engines would be used to drive great plants of inner machinery, or pull great railroad trains across the continent, or propel great vessels across the ocean would have been stoned to death or considered a harmless lunatic. But had he added at that time that the world would be able to send messages across continents or under oceans, or converse by word of mouth 1,000 miles through the telephone, or that cities would be lighted and cars propelled by electricity, or that great cities would be built in what was the great American desert or in the Rocky Mountains, he would have been confined in an insane asylum. A true prophet is not without honor save in his own country. He is understood in our day as applicable to a person who can foretell future events and conditions. Notwithstanding the manifold blessings we now enjoy, in addition to the railroads, telephones, telegraphs, electric lights, and intricate machinery for manufacturing, I see in the next 100 years, the discovery and propagation of new varieties of fruits, vegetables, fishes, fowls, and animals, and now congratulate Your Honor and your millions of constituents at the mouth of the call upon the vast improvements you made in 100 years. Your consolidation with Kansas City, Missouri, and other cities lying nearby, some of which have come into existence long after this date, have simplified municipal government. One mayor, one council, one police department, one fire department, and so on has saved the people great sums of money in taxes. The county governments of what is now Wyandotte County, Kansas, and Jackson County, Missouri, in your day is merged into the municipality of Kansas City, USA. Your 40-story buildings constructed entirely of steel and glass, your steel paved streets, your perfect sewer systems, oh, I'm getting depressed, would delight our modern city dads. The absence in your city of contagious diseases, paupers, loafers, thieves, and kindred pests make it a veritable paradise to live in. As your means of convenience are entirely electrical and pneumatic and run upon perfect systems, you have no health-endangering miasmas to sicken your people. We have known of electricity and its uses for a number of years, but have never yet discovered it as you have done for the benefit of all the people. You are able to generate power from the river's currents, the waves of the lakes and ocean billows, the falling rains and snows, the rising heat and vapor, the summer breezes, and the winter blasts, besides innumerable other agencies not known to my generation. You have learned how to operate machinery by applying the expansion and contraction of solid bodies caused by changes in temperatures. You store up the heat of the sun's rays when needed for physical comforts and move it from place to place at will with a minimum cost. Your locomotives move so rapidly that the friction of the air on the boilers generates steam sufficient to furnish the speed. To double the speed, you've constructed flat cars 1,000 miles long with tracks built upon them. And on these tracks, trains run at 300 miles an hour, thus doubling the rate. As the lower car moves in the same direction at the same speed, causing passengers to travel at the rate of 600 miles an hour. In some instances, you have doubled and trebled this speed by building more tracks on still higher cars and have proven that almost any heat can be attained. We've experimented only a little with airships and know little of them, but they are common convenience for you. The motor power of your airships is generated by the speed of the vessel. At the rear end of the ship is a small circular propeller that is formed to revolve by the air that rushes from the front through a funnel-shaped tube. When the wind is strong or the speed is great, the air is collected in the large end of the funnel and is conveyed backward with force great enough to furnish power to the propeller, and thus the speed is placed at any rate desirable. Does it really work that way? It makes sense to me. The terrific heat that causes atmospheric disturbances is stored for future use, and the storm is prevented. And then he goes on and on about nectar and gold at the bottom of the ocean and x-rays. The x-rays will be so improved that miners can look into the mountains and see by the gold, and by electrical appliances melt the mineral and run it out of its hiding place through the opening of the x-rays. This guy is brilliant. Goes on and on and on. And concludes, schools, churches, and libraries you will have everywhere, and all will be free. The child of 10 years will have more knowledge than the average adult of today. I am an agnostic, and I'm always looking for the sunny spots of life. I believe the human race is growing wiser and better, and that he who is chosen by the voters of Kansas City, USA as mayor in 100 years will be a man of ability and virtue with a heart large enough to take in all of his people, and that the people far and near will say, great is Kansas City, USA, and the honorable mayor is the prophet. Longfellow is my favorite poet, and I believe with him that, quote, life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not written of the soul. That though I shall cease ere many years to look upon dear old Kansas City through material eyes, I shall exchange them for more perfect ones, and shall continue to watch her growth and prosperity, and shall ever love her and her people. In conclusion, let the little mayor of the little city of Kansas City, Kansas, shake hands through a century with the great and good mayor of the great city of Kansas City, USA. Isn't that great? It's wonderful.
This is a note that's pretty representative of what we're seeing in the box now. These apparently were calling cards and dance cards and other things that were placed in the box at the dance. To the public and my relatives, here's to the 21st century. May it be as happy to you as the 20th has been to me. 100 years ago tonight, I enjoyed myself to my heart's content. I was with Clara Reinecke, a beautiful girl whom I hope to someday make my wife. Yours, M.C. Nolan. We're going to be closing down, I think. It's been about 2 hours now. What we're finding that remains in the box are these types of small calling cards with messages. Can you hear me? We didn't find a fan. The only fan that we found was this partial fan that's down on the far end. I do want to make a comment. This is an interesting item. You can see that it's singed on the edges. And it says, written in pencil, this letter had passed through the fire of April 4th, 1900, in which Convention Hall was burned. This is signed by John P. Loomis, who's the manager, and Jonathan W. Spees, who was, I don't quite know, and E.M. Clendenning, who was the secretary for the Convention Hall. One of the things that we have been talking about is that we have a piece of Convention Hall. It was the switchboard, copper switchboard, that had gone through the fire and has melted into a very interesting piece of art, abstract art. And we've been talking about possibly using that as the top of the pedestal that will contain the new Century Ball that will be placed here in Union Station. I don't know what happened to MC. We welcome you to look at the material. We can try to answer some questions if you would like, or at least I will be willing to try to answer some questions for you. And I want to thank you all for coming and being part of this historic event.